members to the an overview of the Action Crisis Production Response Program. And what we're going to review today are some a little bit of background on the where the program is, and talk about the benefits of participating in the program, and talk about some specific opportunities that exist today. I do want to just let you know that we do plan to record this so that it can be available to watch again later. We'll put it up on the website after the presentation, or if you know of somebody that wasn't able to attend and wants to hear the briefing, they'll be able to listen to it afterwards. And then also, if you do have any questions and answers, there is a box there for questions and answers. Please post any of your questions, and at the end of the briefing, we will review and get through as many of the questions as possible. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John. Our speakers today, it's John Wazinski, which I know all of you know. He's our Executive Director of America Makes. And then as far as the program point of contacts, it's myself and Bill Walsh. And with that, I'm going to put it over to John, and he's going to give you a little background.
Okay, well, thank you, Georgette. So yeah, we just wanted to, today's meeting is really all about, or this webinar is all about kind of giving everyone an update on where we're at with the Advanced Manufacturing Crisis Production Response, or AMCPR. You may or may not have heard about that. We've talked a little bit about it over the last couple of months, but it's really the program that we've been working on with lots of you at the Institute for the last 9-10 months since the COVID pandemic has hit. And this is the next phase of that activity. And with that, there's some opportunities to get more engaged. And we wanted to give everyone, in particular, this is a briefing for membership, to understand where we're at and potentially get engaged. So the AMCPR, quick overview, you may have, again, seen this before. But from the very beginning, when everything shut down back in the February-March timeframe, it led lots of us in the additive industry to take action. And ultimately, that action and that coordination amongst our industry has proven to be quite impactful in the response against the crisis. It's been noted all over, different journal publications. We actually were, as a technology, just called out in the New England Journal of Medicine a couple of days ago, actually, stating how additive manufacturing has stepped up and met needs related to supply chain shortages during the pandemic. So what we're wanting to talk about today is not really focus on the past, but instead think about what did we learn and how can we continue to learn from that such that we're better prepared in the future. So AMCPR is really focused on, continued support during COVID, and maybe most importantly, future preparedness for future crises, recognizing that there will be additional crises, but we aren't certain what they will be and what they'll look like. But we know we learned a lot, and we want to, take advantage of that, and as a country and as really across the globe, be better prepared to address that. So we're specifically going to talk about a couple of elements of the program today, and in particular, we are wanting to, what we realized was the trust factor is a significant, there's a significant need to have a trusted partner and have trust in a system. And ultimately, we've been saying from the very beginning that the build out of an enduring infrastructure is something that we as a country need. We need to know where to go to get access to information and have trust in that information such that we can, do the next right thing. That's what we've been saying really from the very beginning. So as part of what we've proposed, we're building out a model repository. And that model repository, can be thought of as, a kind of the next version of what a strategic stockpile looks like, but really the digital stockpile that is needed in order to ultimately enable that. One of the things that worked best during the crisis has been the ability to digitally distribute manufacturing. And we have a terrific use case for how it worked on relatively low criticality components. What we need to do is figure out what does that look like as problems get more difficult, whether it's because of the product, the process, the ecosystem, what have you. So that's really what we're here to talk about today. You'll see in that rightmost column, we're planning on building a publicly accessible repository that will enable access to information. And then ultimately, we want to create a playbook and a roadmap. But in order to do that, we have to pressure test the system. And what we want to do to pressure test that is run through a series of different scenarios. And we're looking for folks from the community, just like those that got engaged to respond to COVID in the first phases. We need folks to get involved and respond during the second phase. So can you go to the next slide, please, Georgette? So as we think about building an enduring infrastructure, both the digital backbone that's required in order to enable that and the workforce that's required to be on the ready when we need to call upon them, we need to continue to work across this continuum. So we've all worked on responding in the earliest days of the crisis, and that worked through us coming together and trusting a system and the relationship that existed between the NIH and VA and FDA and ultimately us as a public-private partner to help communicate information out to the community. But really, in order to continue to make an impact and most importantly, be in the position that we are ready to stand up next time there is a crisis, we need to scale this capability. We need to scale it dramatically. And one thing that we all understand is if we don't exercise the system, just like, we've used a series of different analogies as thinking about this, whether it's 911 or your fire drills when you were in school, you're always running drills to make sure that you're able to respond appropriately when something is needed. So you know that when you dial 911, somebody is on the other end of that phone and is going to answer and respond. We've got to get a system in place for our country that we're able to respond to the supply chain needs when a crisis happens. And then ultimately, we're able to learn a lot from that to create more resilient supply chains in time of normalcy. So next slide, please. So what we're asking here, and we're kind of bottom line right now, is we need folks to get involved. We'll talk here for the balance of the presentation or the briefing on more specifically what these scenarios are, where the opportunities exist, and kind of the complexity of the opportunities and what does it mean. But ultimately, we're looking to build this enduring infrastructure. We're wanting to be ready to produce parts, whatever they might be, when there is a time of crisis. We have great examples of how people stepped up. To date, there's a couple of pictures which probably can't necessarily read, but those are two different member examples of organizations, Rapid Prototyping Group and IC3D, two different scenarios, but both, just like many of you on the phone, I'm sure, got engaged right in the very beginning, came up with innovative solutions and took action. That is, it is a big part of what ultimately became helpful in the first phases of the COVID response. But what we're trying to do with, and really the goal of AMCPR, is to build something that is this reliable, trusted system so that we know we can depend on it. We know someone will pick up when we dial 911 ultimately. So in order to do that, we need to demonstrate our capability within this space. So we're building the system right now. We're in the midst of collecting information. We're actually having another workshop next week to collect additional requirements for the model repository and portal. It will be a place where information can be digitally distributed where it needs to be across the country into the regions where help is needed ultimately. And we want to test all of this by illuminating different crises scenarios and then wrap all of the learnings up from that and create a path forward or a proposed playbook on how we as a country can take action, and probably most importantly, what does the strategic roadmap look like so that we can actually build the system that our country needs. So we'll go back really quick, sorry. So just wrapping up here, and I'll hand it over to Georgette. Reasons why we're looking for folks to get engaged. There is value, or we believe there's value in you demonstrating your specific additive manufacturing capability. So in some ways it is an opportunity to continue to help support the country in getting prepared and making sure that we don't run into some of the same problems that we ran into back in March, April, May. But again, this is all about testing out the system. So there'll be opportunity to get visibility, showcase and demonstrate your capability, get involved with the system. I know many of you have been on different panels with us and many others over the last 10 months. We know a lot of people are interested in this space. We're trying to coordinate that activity so that we're working on something. Again, I've repeatedly said, I think demand and prioritization are two of our biggest problems in our response for COVID to date. We've got to better understand that. So again, we need to coordinate our response as a community and as a technology so that we're working on the right thing. We don't need 20 different groups going off and trying to develop this solution. So I'm hoping that there will be enough interest from the community to get involved in these scenarios as we walk through them here. So now I'll hand it over to Georgette, I believe, and we'll give you more details on what we're trying to build.
Model repository system. There's two main key efforts that are going on this program to help develop this sustainable and system and get as many people involved as possible. As John mentioned, to not be in the same position we were when COVID first hit. But one is engaging the ecosystem. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that, but basically identifying the needs, the motivations, getting all the capabilities, getting the supply chain, the network together. And then the other piece is the model repository and portal. And that's what that is our conduit for rapid production and providing a platform that you can get all the key players, the requesters, the suppliers, the reviewers, and the designers, all getting into a system. So as needs arise, there's a centralized nationwide area that people can go to get their needs fulfilled. So from the ecosystem perspective, and I want to note this is not all inclusive by any means, but the ecosystem involves a variety of different organizations, and from the academia and workforce education development perspective to the federal government, which also includes the VHA, the FDA, the NIH. So not only the DoD, but the other regulatory agencies. Then you got your manufacturers from your makers all the way up to your large businesses. You got the manufacturing institutes, not only America Makes, but the other organizations that are out there. There are definitely regional and local efforts. So you have your state and local government that needs to be incorporated, your technology integrators. So this ecosystem is built off the strength of the stakeholders from various industries, and they all play a critical role in the AM supply chain. And all of the members here, you play a critical role in the success of all of this. So we're looking for opportunities to connect all these organizations, and even even other ones that may not fit specifically into one of these categories. So we know we haven't reached everybody. We're continuing to look to grow. If you're not in the system, we definitely encourage you to get your name in the system. And we recognize each organization has their own unique needs, and we want to understand how the AMCPR can support your needs. I'm going to hand it off to Bill, and he's going to go into the details of the MRP and the specific opportunities that we're going to start talking about.
Thanks, Georgette. Afternoon, everyone. I know that John and Georgette has kind of laid the stage pretty well for the need for the scenarios to pressure test this system that we know is going to be critical for helping provide products in a time of need. What I'm going to start drilling in here to is the details of the MRP as well as the scenarios that we have at least drafted to a point where we're ready to get input from membership on willingness to participate in some of these areas. So I've been involved with the MRP since March of this year, when we started with a kind of a disparate systems. We were using NIH as our repository. We were using America Makes portal to capture supplier capability. And we were using the VA for our testing and reviewers to add that trust value to the review process. And during that time, we were using a lot of our internal resources to act as conduit between these users of the system. So I'm going to explain here the users, but again, the MRP is about taking away that need for user or for emails to be sent back and forth. This is again conduit to connect all of the users within the MRP and allow them to communicate. The first one there is a requester. So that's if we look at our COVID example that we've recently experienced, this is typically hospitals or clinics requesting PPE for their particular needs as they saw them. They are interfacing with our MRP. As we see to the right of that, we have designers. The designers are then creating parts, creating TDPs, and participating in challenges. They're filling that repository with products that are then evaluated through a review process, which we see down on the bottom left, to ensure that these products are safe to be used as the design intent. So the reviewers are there to access and evaluate the designs. They're also to evaluate the manufacturability, the performance specifications, and again, that is a very critical role and user within our system. The fourth there is a supplier, and this is where we have capacity to make good things. At that point, they just need to connect with the requesters and understand what those needs really are. So our system is intended to allow all of these connection points so that even requesters can, and in some cases, perhaps request products that are not even on our repository, so designers could get design inspiration to be able to manufacture, to design for those to be manufactured. So this is a high-level overview of the personas. So as John mentioned, as we go to workshops, of course, they took those who are monitoring and managing the system. They took our input first and gathered what they thought the MRP should look like in order to be able to facilitate these interactions. The second is the workshops, which John and Georgette mentioned. That's where we're reaching out to particular groups and asking them what needs do they see that we have not uncovered in the few months that we had been running the MRP. So we're gathering that input. And the third is that we're looking at again, pushing that forward towards this scenarios where we're actually going to test the MRP that we're building and continually to refine. So if you can move to the next slide, Georgette. So in the scenario testing, we felt that it was important to really get a broad from low difficulty to high difficulty tests or scenarios developed so that we can look at how this MRP is going to perform over that full range of complexities. So as John mentioned, we're kind of bringing to life the capabilities of the MRP. We look at this exercise as utilizing somewhat controlled resources to interact with this MRP in order to allow us to learn how it is meeting the needs of all of those users. So to do that, we looked at being able to develop a design of experiments, or it's really a systematically assessed response. As you can see, A through E are the scenarios on the right side in the table, and down along the left, you'll see the dimensions in complexity. So one, we have process complexity. We wanted a high and a low in process complexity, and that is MRP process complexity. So it's really not the additive manufacturing complexity. So we want ones that have very low level of complexity, others that we want very high. Product complexity, I think, is just what it says there. It's everything from something simple made on a FDM desktop printer to something that is, made in metal and on a much more sophisticated piece of equipment with lots more, post-processing, and also that's a kind of the level of complexity. The ecosystem complexity is looking at, who's going to be involved in this scenario. Do we have a lot of people involved, or is it just a requester and a supplier? The next is stakeholder capability, and we look at that as, again, the relationships that we have around, again, connecting all of these users from the MRP. The last there is connectivity risk. If there's a difficulty with accessing the information, are you in an austere environment? So we are also looking at it when you have high and low connectivity risk. So I guess the point here is to show the depth of of detail that we've gone through to make sure that we are really testing the system with very easy applications and very difficult applications. The one thing I will want to point out on this slide is you can see A and D are sort of hatched out there. Those are not available scenarios for participation. So as we move to the next slides, you will see that we've taken some of the low hanging fruit and already have solutions, not solutions, but I would say participants for that. So with that being said, can you move to the next slide, Georgette? So this is an example scenario. Next week, as Georgette will kind of explain a little bit later, next week we're going to be pushing these out so that you can have a look at them and see where it is that you can become involved. But this is an example of that scenario. So it's going to say, this is, scenario B. It's crushed as COVID. It's about making, as you see on the bottom left there, it's about making a stopgap mask. So it has, and you can see on the right of that it has the process complexity is high, the product complexity is low because it's already been designed and developed and tested. The ecosystem is high, the stakeholder is low. So again, that's where it fits within that matrix of scenario difficulty. But if you look across, you see the product, you'll see what we are expecting the requester to do, what's expected of the designer in this case, and what's expected of the reviewer, and then what is expected of the supplier. So as these scenarios get distributed, I think that this is going to be a place where you're going to look and say, "This, I have the capability to be able to provide a product or a design." That's how we see the membership becoming involved here. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so if we're looking at the scenarios that we have openings for, you can see here across the top, we have the one I just referred to, the COVID crushes, community crushes COVID, and we have it's a simulating a healthcare crisis around PPE. We have 1 to 2 design openings, 1 opening on requester, and 5 to 10 openings on suppliers. So again, that there's quite a bit of room for to get engaged on that particular scenario. The second one is really simulating a natural disaster impact to water delivery system. We have it as a coupling that is being made. The openings available there are from a requester standpoint and a supplier. So making these pieces as well as requesting them. And we also have an opening for TDP Creator. So as we have found in our previous work with the AMCPR to date, we understand the value of that technical data. And we have an opportunity here for involvement in creating that upfront information about manufacturing, as well as instructions for use, cleaning, things like that. The third one there, impossible impellers, it's simulating a natural disaster, an energy disruption in the oil and gas, and the particular manufacturer has gone out of business, so it's essentially an obsolete part. And there we have openings for requester as well as supplier to make that part. The next is tooling takes too much time, and this is a natural disaster and a power failure. For that particular scenario, we have 1 requester opening and 1 to 2 in the supplier. In the last there, the taking a shot at shots, we really, I think we want to set ourselves up for a failure at some point, because we really want to see the extent of what the MRP can do. This is a very challenging application, healthcare crisis, distribution of vaccines, and it's about printing like a barrel and a plunger for a syringe. So again, this is a higher bar. We have 1 to 2 openings in requester, as well as 5 openings on the print side of that. So to kind of follow up on this slide, we're going to, again, release next week more details about each one of them. And again, look for members to raise their hand to become involved in playing one of the roles as a user persona.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome, Georgette.
So what are the next steps? Some things to do right away is, I mentioned it earlier about the ecosystem. If you haven't already and you don't have your capabilities in the system, please submit, whether it's request, capabilities, design. Please go to our website, and then under the COVID response button, you'll find this, and you can insert your capabilities to continue to expand our ecosystem. This is a system that was developed during when COVID hit, and we will be transferring all of this into the new MRP as it's developed. But this is the way to get everybody connected. So, please go in there and upload your information if you haven't done so already. Within the next 2 weeks, we plan to release the scope of work and get responses to the scopes of work. So next week we will release the scope of work. We'll send them out to all through let everybody know through email that the scopes of work are out there for your review and response to. And then the following week, we'll give you a week to then respond with your interest and ability and proposal to participate. And we're going to keep it as simple as possible. From there, when we select the teams, we'll then get MOUs in place and then execute. And that will also include training on the MRP as part of the execution of the scenarios. So this time frame will be, the actual execution is expected to happen January, from the training all the way to then executing the scenarios from January through April of 2021. So John mentioned this earlier, just mentioning it again. We do have another workshop coming up where we continue to define and shape what the AMCPR program should look like. You know, it got initiated from COVID, and we're moving it towards being able to handle any kind of crisis that would come along. So we are having another workshop on next week on December 8th. It's Tuesday from 1 to 4. If you're interested in participating, please go and register for the workshop, and I note the link there, or you can go to the America Makes Workshop website and just go to the AMCPR program, and you'll see the event to register at. And again, we're really working on defining and shaping the program. And then if you're interested in learning more, please contact myself at any time to get more information on the program or how you can get involved. Or you can go to our website under the AMCPR program, or email the AMCPR email. So with that, that concludes our presentation. We'll read through any questions that have been provided and answer it for the second part of this briefing. Amy, if you're there, were there any questions?
Hi, yes. We only have 2 questions right now. So the first one comes from Jake Fallon, he's asking, who are the participants that you see being involved in this system? Does it include any homemakers or companies? And do you have to be an America Makes member?
So I'll take the first stab, and then Bill, you can add on to there. So who are we targeting? We are targeting to use the system any requesters, suppliers, the suppliers would include makers or anywhere from makers all the way to large businesses. So whoever is capable of meeting the requirement of the requests that come in. We're expecting designers. And then also reviewers, which can consist of some of the regulatory agencies, but also other locations that have the capability of testing some products out to ensure that they meet the requirements. So those are the key people we're expecting to be part of this. Can you read the second part of the question? I'm sorry, Amy, there's a second part at the end.
Does it include any homemakers
I answered
or
that.
just companies? And do you have to be an America Makes member?
To be part of the AMCPR program, you do not need to be an America Makes member, but we definitely see benefit in becoming a member of America Makes to keep the network going. I don't know, Bill or John, if you have anything to add.
I would add to a little bit there, Georgette, in that I think when say homemakers, I'm assuming it's like for makers, and certainly we're encouraging all manufacturers to come and register their capability and participate in the AMCPR program. And part of the reason is we saw very good response from both the more advanced level additive manufacturing capability, but we saw a great response from the maker community. And we also found that a local presence, like a regional presence, is really where the value is generated. And having makers as well as small and medium enterprises involved in those areas were critical to meeting the response needs. So my response to that is yes, we're looking at non-members as well as the spectrum on manufacturers.
Okay. The next question is, how is liability handled for someone like a supplier? If I make a part that ends up failing, who is responsible?
Yeah. Great question. I think that, IP and regulatory and governance, all of that is something that we are aware of through our first work with the AMCPR to date, and we have a again regulatory group that's looking into sort of those more sensitive details around confidentiality. I don't think our MVP is going to have a lot of features built into it addressing that. However, I do believe that our, moving forward with playbook and roadmap, we do see a definite need for either disclaimers or, in some cases, with the regulatory bodies, kind of granting some sort of approved for or accepted for use labeling. But I would say that that's going to be more addressed in the playbook and roadmap more than the MRP at this early stage.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think that's one thing that we're trying to prove out through this MVP. So we will be, Georgette talked a little bit about what the next steps are. The intention is, as we identify and select participants, we will also engage in some level of MOU or some kind of documentation that, specifically risk related to manufacturing a part in the near term for this system. As we're proving it out, we will address in that document, just so, we're clear. These are parts which are being made to learn from so that we can be prepared and actually build our roadmap, build the playbook, and ultimately build the impact report that's associated with all of this to show, again, this is looking forward. What do we need to have in place as a country? Those are really important considerations that we need to get documented. So some of that we're going to learn, and I'm sure folks like you will bring up good questions like that as we're going through this to make sure we're accounting for it. But in the first version of the MRP, that will not necessarily be, directly considered.
Okay. Move on to the next one. I can see them now, Amy. Can you describe what would be expected for an organization to participate as a requester for the various scenarios? Do they have to actually have a real request, or is it just a sample through for the process of a request?
Yeah, it's more to the latter on that. From a requester standpoint, we would love to have a requester from the industry or the sector that is that would be normally requesting that. So ideally, it'd be nice to have a hospital requesting, but we are going to, within this system, in the scenarios, we're going to also allow others to participate in that request portion. So again, it's I would say it's perfectly fine for a member organization to act as a requester. It's probably going to be a relatively low kind of complexity ask for a participant when compared to a supplier or a designer.
Okay. There's a question about the link on the American Makes US AMCPR to update your organization's capability. If you go up to the top, and I can share my screen just to quickly go through this. I think I could share my screen again. You go. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
No.
I'm sharing. Is that a yes or a no?
I cannot see it.
No.
Try this again.
Yes, we can see it now.
No.
All right. So here's the AMCPR website. If you hit here, the button that says COVID response, you hit there, and then this is where you can submit your capabilities, whether you're on the needs community, manufacturer community, or the designer community. If you have further problems, just send me an email and I'll help you through it.
Yeah, and this is kind of an example here. When you go to the designers, we will gather information here from about the design that will connect you to the NIH site. But the manufacturers that are in the center there, it's really about understanding the capability of the supplier. So it's going to ask things like, what type of machines and processes and processing, and so it's a pretty thorough collection of information. And what we have done in the past has been, when we see requests come in and know it's a microjet fusion printed part, we then look through our supplier database to find out who has that capability, and then we connect the suppliers or the requesters to those suppliers in order to be able to fulfill those needs. So us having that information here and understanding your capability allows us to make that connection. In the MRP, it will be done automatically.
Thanks, Bill. May, I'm going to ask you to read the next question as I get out of stop sharing.
Okay, I had a couple of sent to me directly, so I'll just go from there. How do you see academia playing a role in this?
So I think, oh, go ahead. I'll say my thoughts on it. As far as academia, those four categories, academia technically could fit into any one of those categories as far as needs, depending on what they do at that specific university. So they could play as a designer. They could play as a reviewer, depending on what their technical capabilities are. They can be a supplier. Some universities have the capability and machines to produce parts. So, and then they may even have needs as a requester. So honestly, just like any other entity, they could fill in any of those roles. It just does depend on what the capability of that entity is. And I'm going to also add that this one isn't as highlighted for this particular webinar, but under the program as a whole, we have a whole EWD, Education Workforce Development section. So we're constantly looking at more trainings and things like that. Josh Kramer from our team is leading it. So there's also opportunities from a training perspective. It's kind of outside of the purpose of this specific webinar, but there's also opportunities there.
Okay. Can you describe the role of the TDP Creator again?
Okay. Yeah, the TDP Creator, I think we see that as in some cases as it's most closely aligned with the designer, but it also brings in some of the requirements and specs from the requester. So the role of that, the TDP requester, is really to understand what the requirements are, as well as the manufacture and use needs and bringing that together into a sort of a documented, in this case, it could be number of files or it could be one file. Again, providing detail for both the manufacturers and users of those products.
I see there's also a question, Amy, I'm not sure if you had others. I'm going to go to this one, and if you have more, we'll go to those. But what are the challenges related to regulations and standards in the design and production of parts for situations of emergency, such as the one we witnessed with COVID?
Just if you can read that again, Georgette. I thought John was taking, but if I can hear it again, I can take the question.
What are the challenges related to regulations and standards in the design and production of parts for situations of emergency, as the one we witnessed with COVID?
Yeah.
So yes, I'm on, Bill. Sorry, I was having camera issues. I mean, that's a complicated question in that it really depends in a lot of ways on what kind of component it is and the criticality of the time frame. So I think our role in this space has been trying to, use our connections to the regulatory bodies to understand and then communicate that as quickly as we could. I mean, even today we're seeing some changes to EUAs that are in place right now that people are currently manufacturing face masks against, that is ultimately going to change some of the rules, meaning you're going to have to do different things as a manufacturer that you didn't have to do a month ago. So it's complicated because it changes quite a bit. I think what we're trying to do and what we need to consider within this system and really learn from these scenarios is what are the considerations that we need to put in place. It's part of the reason we have some of those folks participating as well. And then, if you look at expanding this problem set out beyond just, say the FDA to other regulatory bodies, it becomes much more complex. I mean, even in our current environment between FDA and NIOSH, who owns what component, is not, for the folks that we deal with most often that don't manufacture these types of goods, they don't understand the difference between those two bodies and who really governs what. So it's something we're trying to figure out how to consider within the system. It's going to be dependent on the actual component. It's probably not even something we can do by product or part family, because when you look at manufacturing process, it ultimately may have different requirements around regulatory considerations. So I don't think I didn't directly answer that question very well because I don't know how to.
Yeah, one thing I'll just add, John, to what you said, we are digging into the regulatory piece to be able to provide a better answer to that. So we're going to probably touch it in this phase of it, but there's going to be more work to be done. That will be incorporated into our roadmap for the future of the program.
Yeah, and I guess along those lines, that is a component of what this roadmap, playbook, and ultimately impact report are looking to get documented, so that we're not going to have all the answers by any means when this is done, but we're going to have more well thought out questions and in some cases lessons learned captured, so that we understand how to maybe address some of what we ran into, but as we look further and deeper, we at least have it documented so we can go start continuing to work the effort or the problem.
I think that's all the questions.
I just saw a new one come in.
Okay.
It says, is this correct? Information submitted to the American Makes AMCPR website about resources available at a production facility can be updated by a submitter with time. I'm guessing they're asking if they submit something, can they update it later on our website? And the answer is yes.
The answer would be yes on that. Yeah, we're keeping it flexible enough to, and again, found this through our first few months of dealing with the current system, is that you need to have the ability for remixes so people can collaborate on a particular design, as well as make iterative improvements. You need to be able to update that design. So yes, all that is, and we have some version control to track that as well. So yeah, we're prepared to handle that even in the earlier version of the MVP, or the minimal viable product for the MRP.
And one more just came in. Where does the AM system connectivity and developments towards a full digital thread, MES, and printer integration, etc., fit into the roadmap?
The question, I believe, is being able to submit a request and then it automatically goes to then a supplier to then print and return. And depending on the product, that's where you get into some security items as well. We're from my perspective, and John, I'm sure you'll have something to add to this, but it's not a it's something that we'll consider, but right now we're still in the early stages of the roadmap, and I'll take that feedback for consideration in there on if and how and where it fits.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it's on the roadmap, or it needs to be on the roadmap is probably the better way of saying it, because the roadmap isn't near complete by any means at this point. We're collecting information from the folks like those of you on the phone. So a way to participate in that, there was a link, I believe, on the last slide there that had information about upcoming workshops. Participating in those is a way to get your ideas like that to be included in the roadmap. It's certainly not in the near term considerations for what the MVP will be able to accomplish as we're building it. But to your point, that's a roadmap item. That is something, I mean, if we want to get to the point where we have a vendor network that is established and based on, component criticality, complexity, vendor qualifications, that's the direction we all want to move, especially as we look not necessarily for times of crisis, but instead for times of normalcy to fill orders. There's a lot of opportunity to help support needs we know exist within the sustainment community, within, just the supply chain in general for additive manufacturing. So it needs to be on there, I guess, is the answer.
I don't see any additional questions.
Okay.
Well, we really appreciate everybody's time. If you think, I know there's a lot of information we presented, as we mentioned, more to come with the specifics of the scope of work here within, by sometime next week. If you think of any other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out or contact myself or one of the other ways that I mentioned on here. We will put just a reminder, we will put the presentation as well as this recording up on our website to listen to again as well. But we really want to thank everybody's time thank everybody for their time today, and look forward to working with you.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much, y'all.